Hello, I'm Nissa and welcome to another Wild Earth travel presentation. We often get asked here about the polar regions, the Arctic and Antarctica. Which one is better? Which one would suit me more? They actually, while they're both covered in snow and ice and they're vast and they have lots of wildlife, they are actually vastly different. So let's talk to our resident polar expert, Sarah Porter, who has actually travelled to both poles to give us more of an insight on which one would suit you best. Hello, Sarah.
Oh, thank you very much, Nissa. Yes, apparently I am now a polar expert, having travelled to both the polar regions, which was very, very incredible opportunities. And the big thing is talking about the differences and obviously how you can effectively sell these polar regions. Because for a lot of people, it is a bucket list tick and a trip that you want to get right, that your clients are only going to do once. So you want to make sure that they're on the right voyage at the right time, doing what they want to do to fulfill their bucket list. So the big question is, what is the difference between the polar regions? Obviously, one has penguins, the other one has polar bears. And what do you prefer? I often get asked, which one is better? Well, that's going to come at the end of this presentation, but I'm going to give you a bit of background into those polar regions. So I think it really starts with a simple geography lesson. And once I kind of grasped this, so many other things fell into place. So when you look at the Arctic, it's actually a frozen ocean surrounded by different continents. Those continents have people, they have communities, and a lot of diversity. Whereas with Antarctica, it's actually a frozen continent that stands alone, surrounded by ocean. And no inhabitants down there. Yes, there are scientific bases down there, but no one's actually lived down there in communities as such. So let's start south, heading down to Antarctica. There is obviously a season to Antarctica. You can only travel there over our summer. But believe it or not, there are seasons within the season. And I think the big thing is always asking your clients why. Why do they want to go where they want to go? And why do they want to go to Antarctica? So if they're after those pristine white environments, the beginning of the season's very untouched. If they're looking more at the wildlife, then there's seasons within that too. Personally, I went towards the end of January and I absolutely loved it because it's when the penguins had all hatched. And we also got the whales coming through as well. And obviously later in the season, you can venture further south, having the ice has melted a lot more by then. So believe it or not, the most popular and the most common, the most cost effective and the most time effective way to do Antarctica, if you like, is to head to Ushuaia and jump on a ship from there and do what's known as the Antarctic Peninsula. There are sort of four main itineraries, and that's obviously the first one. The second one I think you should always consider with your clients is adding on South Georgia and the Falklands. It's absolutely incredible. The wildlife in South Georgia is an explosion of wildlife, and you don't get these big emperor penguins and king penguins down on the peninsula. There's obviously a lot of history there as well with Shackleton and the like, and a lot of war history up into the Falklands. You can also fly to Antarctica. Personally, I think it's cheating. I think you really should be doing the Drake. It's part of the adventure. But a lot of people don't like the idea of that, or perhaps your clients are time poor. But you can fly down to the peninsula and skip that Drake passage. And finally, we've got vessels that leave from New Zealand and do what's known as the Ross Sea region of Antarctica. The bonus, the cherry on the top, is that you do stop at those New Zealand sub-Antarctic islands, Snares, Macquarie, Enderby, Auckland Island, Campbell Island, which is rather incredible down there as well. And obviously, the Ross Sea region of Antarctica holds a lot of heritage for New Zealanders, especially with the huts down there. So again, if your clients, why is that historical tie to New Zealand and the early expeditions down there, then the Ross Sea region could be ticking their box. So my personal trip down to Antarctica, I was on one of PONANT's vessels, Mistral. They've got 4 sister ships that do the polar regions. This Didn't quite use the pool. Actually, I did use the pool once down there, but obviously beautiful, environment on board with gorgeous lounges, amazing cuisine, and fantastic suites and cabins on board. First test, if you like, is crossing the Drake Passage. There's my travel buddy and our colleague Tamasa. Her and I really put it to the test and thought we'd jump on one of the treadmills while we were crossing the Drake. We didn't fall over. Just remember, these vessels are built for the Drake Passage, though. So there are stabilizers on board, and it was actually pretty easy heading down to Antarctica. Coming home was a different story. When you get down there, one of the first things you come across is the wildlife. Believe it or not, you smell the penguins more than you before you see them. And it is actually one of the key differences, again, between the Arctic and Antarctic region. Human contact is very limited down in Antarctica, which makes these animals quite fearless and quite inquisitive as well. So often you can just sit still, and these guys come to you. There's obviously rules and regulations, but the penguins don't get the memo. There are, again, those seasons to the wildlife. We had the most incredible evening where dinner was interrupted one night by humpback whales bubbling feeding. Wow. So that's when they sort of blow bubbles around the krill, and they sort of leap up from the water and eat that krill. So needless to say, the only person disappointed that evening was the chef, because everyone evacuated the dining room to get out to the decks, and you're surrounded by these amazing wildlife experts as well with the expedition team. So they're there to really enhance and almost interpret what's going on. So I think after that evening, I was definitely automatically became a whale expert as well. Yep. As I mentioned, when I was there at the end of January as well, a lot of the baby penguins had hatched. And you've just got these incredible encounters with all these little fluffy chicks. And it's honestly like days of our lives when you see penguins. And again, you've got the experts there who are, I'm sure there's a proper term, I just refer to them as penguinologists, but they're really interpreting what's going on with the wildlife as well. The other key difference with Antarctica I touched on earlier is the people. You know, there are no locals as such. There's no native communities down in Antarctica, but you do get the opportunity to visit some various stations, and you see them, those scientific stations dotted around the coastline. We did call into Port LaCroix, which was amazing as well. There's a little retail shop there, so you do get the chance to buy a souvenir or two. And send a postcard home, but just don't hold your breath, because it does take a bit of time for that postcard to get home. The history down there is phenomenal as well. One of our last stops was Deception Island, which was an old whaling station, and you actually sail into the crater and you can just see, and you can actually feel, the history down there. It was actually quite a moving sort of stop for many of us, because you can sort of anticipate how life was down there for the early whalers and things, and again, just such a privilege to go to these untouched and spectacular places. Ice is another thing that, between you and me, I was very much, well, ice belongs in a glass, there can't be that much to ice. Well, let me tell you, there are so many different types of ice. There's fast ice, there's first year ice, there's brash ice, there's pack ice, and of course there are these incredible icebergs. And again, it is different with Antarctica and the Arctic because of that geology. And cruising through the giant slushies is just phenomenal. I might say that being in a Zodiac is like being in a safari jeep, and it really does fill your soul when you're cruising in a Zodiac through the ice, and you get to see and hear the ice, and often you get to see and hear those glaciers carving as well, which is pretty neat. So heading to the Arctic, it's a bit more complicated, to be honest, in the Arctic, but again, there are seasons to it. You can actually travel to the Arctic all year round, and of course there's different things happening up in that region. So ask your clients why. Why do they want to go to the Arctic? Is it the Northern Lights? Is it the wildlife? Is it the culture? then it helps us, the team at Wild Earth Travel, narrow down when's going to be right for your client. And then we look at the what voyage, then we look at the who, the operator, the vessel, and so forth. So just remember, we're very much a matchmaking service at Wild Earth Travel. And because we look after every single operator, small ship expedition operator that goes to Antarctica or the Arctic, we help you do that matchmaking process and take all that dirty work away from you. So the Arctic is actually made up of a whole host of different countries. You've got Canada, you've got USA with Alaska, you've got Greenland, you've got Russia, Norway, Iceland. All of these different countries make up the Arctic. So again, there's the variety when it comes to it. There's the variety of the geology, but there's also things that culture and the wildlife comes into play. I was fortunate to head up to the Arctic, the east coast of Greenland on PONANT, the world's only luxury icebreaker, Le Commodore Charcot. We went early in the season and we were literally breaking the ice. It was just sea ice, so don't worry. One of my first concerns was, crikey, should we be breaking this ice? But no, it's ice that was going to melt very soon after as well. When it comes to the Arctic, perhaps your clients' why is the wildlife. Well, I can tell you, they're there. Many want to see the king of the Arctic, the polar bear. Rules and regulations and obviously climate change and things are making it a bit trickier these days, but I can attest that there is a healthy population up there. This is not going to happen for you or your clients, but we actually came across 68 polar bear. I think David Attenborough would even be jealous of that sighting, and not gloating at all either, am I? Why? Because there was a dead whale carcass. So it was very much a buffet that brought these animals together. And they certainly had a fantastic buffet that lasted a very long time, with all of the various polar bear coming in and getting their full bellies. What we were able to do is to stop where we were. The ice reformed around us. And we got to experience so many 48 hours. I did not sleep. I lived on coffee. And of course, there's the sun doesn't set at that time of the year. So you've got that midnight sun. And we just had the most incredible viewing of these polar bear. We saw one set of triplets, two sets of twins. It's quite unusual. I'm also a polar bear expert, by the way, now too, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but for the male polar bear to get back in business with the female, they don't like cubs around, so they quite often eat them. But of course, they weren't hungry. These male polar bears had full bellies, and it was like they were rolling around with their full tummies. And once that ice reformed around our ship, this was about 2:00 in the morning, they actually came to give us a bit of a sniff as well. So absolutely phenomenal encounter. We cannot guarantee this. It's a very, very slim chance. But as our captain said, there's actually an Inuit proverb, only the ice and the weather will decide. And it's certainly decided for us. We changed course and we came across this incredible, we called it a polar bear island. By the end of the voyage. There are other wildlife up there. You've obviously got Arctic foxes, reindeer, walrus, muskox, seals, whales, as well as a whole host of bird life. Just remember though, the hunting pressures up in the Arctic, the wildlife does often seem quite wary. And also be aware that, because the wildlife up there can eat you with our polar bear, you don't actually spend as much time off the ship. It's great when you see the polar bear, but you have to stay on the main ship. So we didn't spend as much time on the Zodiacs and on land. There were a couple of occasions where land excursions got called off at the last minute because there was a polar bear on the horizon. Really good problem when you see the polar bear, but obviously it just means that you're not on the land with them, which is probably a good thing as well. Another massive draw card for the Arctic is the people. There's a huge diversity in cultures up there, and the language and the customs. And with these differences also comes a really united connection that they all have to the land. They've all got traditional livelihoods, such as the fishing and the hunting and things up there, which I found absolutely amazing. Because of the conditions, we actually couldn't call into Itatakatunget, which was one of the communities we intended to visit. But we had 2 Inuit hunters on board our vessel, Scoresby and Ugi, and I was fortunate enough to have some fantastic chats with them and really got an incredible insight into the way they lived. Yes, they still do hunt polar bear, they have a quota, but for them it's part of their sustainable way of life and their livelihood. But it was just an amazing opportunity if you do get to engage with the culture in the communities up there. And needless to say, I'm invited back to visit them in the smallest community in the world. So when it comes to the vessels, look, all of the vessels are a little bit different. And again, you know, the beauty with Wild Earth Travel is we cater for everything. We've got expedition right through to luxury. We've got different levels of activity. And we're there. We're like your matchmaking service. We're like your broker for small ships. And we help matchmake what's going to be right for you. When it comes to PONANT, you know, and with a lot of our operators, look, the food is absolutely fantastic. You're not going to have big buffets and hundreds of people at buffets. Numbers are always limited on our small ships for a good reason. You've got refined cuisine, but you've also got fantastic a la carte menus. And hey, if you just want a burger and chips for lunch or dinner, there's that on the menu as well. A lot of the vessels that in PONANT's one of them are fully inclusive. So if your clients do like the odd cocktail and what have you, then obviously we help match a vessel and an operator that's going to have those. But if your clients aren't interested in that and they don't want to be subsidising everyone else's happy hour, then no problem. We've got operators that don't include the full drinks package and the like. With a lot of the vessels, there's also fitness facilities on board, outdoor pools, indoor pools, gyms. Apparently, I didn't go into the gym, but there are those facilities again on board. And the big thing is the daily program. You know, a lot of people go, "Oh, how do I know what's going to happen?" With a lot of our vessels and operators, when you go to bed at night, you'll get the daily program on your pillow. It's going to give you an outline of what's lined up the next day. With the likes of PONANT, which is both French and English, you know, they do things like the lectures and things in both languages. And again, you know, those sort of preferences are important when it comes to your client choosing the right vessel. So you can let us know what languages they do or don't like and what have you. On all the vessels, you've got an incredible expedition team. They're there leading the voyage. They're specialists in whatever they do. You'll always have the right language in your zodiac, and they're there to really enhance it. They also do some fantastic talks as the days in the evenings, and you know, you might have a morning at sea, whether it be history, whether it be biology. I think in Antarctica, one of the most fascinating ones I had was the algae. I never thought algae on the ice would be so fascinating, but when you come across these people who are so passionate and enthusiastic, you can even get excited the next day when you're out spotting algae on the ice. Some of our vessels have what I would consider light entertainment. Don't think Cirque du Soleil. You know, we're not putting on massive cabaret shows. As our captain said, you know, the show is outside. But with many of the operators, you can expect light entertainment in the form of singers and musicians. But one of the best places for entertainment is in the bridge. Again, activity level changes with the different operators and voyages. One thing I never thought I'd actually stay afloat for, but I absolutely loved, was kayaking through the icebergs. If your clients have particular interests and activities in mind, do let us know. There's kayaking. Some of our operators offer, you know, snowshoeing, camping on the ice, even snorkeling. So however crazy it may seem, just let us know, and that might be one big part of their bucket list tick. One thing for sure, though, the Zodiac cruising is fantastic. I do get a lot of clients go, "Oh, I'm not sure about getting in and out of the Zodiacs." Look, to be honest, if you can get in and out of a car, you can get in and out of the Zodiac. And it's actually not your job. The guys in the blue jacket there, it's their job to get you safely in and out of the Zodiac. So please reassure your clients it's easy so long as they do what they're told. And the guys in the blue jackets will make sure it happens seamlessly and safely. Another question I always get asked by clients is, oh, what do I pack? What am I going to wear? Be reassured, you're not going to need to go out and get a whole new outfit and spend thousands of dollars. You know, if you sail or if you ski in New Zealand, a lot of those layers you're already going to have. Many of the operators provide the jacket. Some of them, to be honest, you don't really use it back in New Zealand, so some of them are on loan. Some of them do offer it for you to keep. But we also help you with all that. We do some fantastic packing lists and tips and tricks. One of my favourite things that I never thought I'd ever say, but when I was on Le Commodore Charcot, the luxury icebreaker, I wore my Ugg boots every day. And I wasn't the only one. They are the most practical shoe to have on board because they keep your feet nice and toasty. But when they do spot wildlife, you can shoot outside to one of the decks and you've got rubber-soled shoes and warm toes. So little tips and tricks like that, that's what we're here for.
Yep.
If you are partaking in anything like the kayaking, obviously they kit you out in all the gear. Don't worry about the orange outfit. I just tried that on for a bit of a laugh. That's one of the full evacuation suits that if you were evacuated on the ice from Le Commodore Charcot, you'd be living in that. It was like doing hot yoga. So needless to say, it was a challenge to get off and on. When it comes to expedition, you know that Inuit proverb, only the ice and weather is going to decide what you'll do. Here is an itinerary that I did. This is the voyage that I did up in Greenland. You know, you've got days 8 to 10, exploration, days 11 to 13, exploring. That is the nature of expedition. So just remember, your clients need to be aware. We cannot guarantee the weather. We cannot guarantee the sea conditions, and we cannot guarantee the wildlife. But hand on heart, I can promise you, your captain and expedition leader are there to really make sure you're getting the most out of where you are and the conditions that you've got. There's often surprise and delight moments as well. This is one of my favourites in Antarctica, where we literally got taken to a floating ice shelf and we had champagne on ice. It was just one of those moments that you kind of go, what are they up to? What are we doing? And you have champagne on ice. We had a pool party, believe it or not, when we were in Paradise Bay. The pool was heated. But I don't tell everyone that. But, you know, we had the most beautiful summer's day down in Antarctica. And believe it or not, I actually got a bit sunburned that day, which was rather cool. But again, it's just those fun moments that you're never going to forget. If you're absolutely bonkers, you can do the polar plunge. This was my first polar plunge that we did off the vessel, the Commodore Charcot. But I actually said to the captain, it didn't look cold enough. Like, you know, you look at that photo and you have to look closely for the iceberg. So, yeah, I stupidly suggested doing one where they cut the hole in the ice, which took that gentleman in the yellow jacket 3.5 hours with a chainsaw. And then I actually did it a third time so I could get my glass of champagne and photo. It was pretty tough, but hey, you only live once, do you?
Very
Another
brave.
one of my favourite evenings when things just couldn't get better. We had dinner on the helicopter deck. So again, you know, you're all rugged up, and we're there on the front of Le Commodore Charcot having an incredible dinner. And they even had dessert rise out of the helicopter hangar. And just remember that Le Commodore Charcot is the only vessel that can take you to the North Pole as well. So if that happens to be your client's why, then we can get them to the North Pole. It's one other myth that a lot of people say, you know, oh, it's too cold for me. Trust me, I used to live on a Pacific island. It is not cold. As you can see in those photos, you get those beautiful, beautiful. It's like a great day up the mountain skiing. And after we did that hike there in our orange jackets, I can tell you we actually ended up walking back down the hill just wearing a T-shirt. Everyone had literally stripped off every layer possible. Another myth is perhaps I'm getting a bit past it. Well, these are two of my wonderful friends that I've met on voyages. Marge is the one with the camera with one of the megahertz down in the sub-Antarctic islands, and Sharon's the one in the kayak. You know, they're both their ages start with the number 8.
Yep.
And they had bucket lists that they had to tick, and they certainly a huge inspiration for me to just keep on doing what you can when you can. A lot of people also think that they have to be super fit. Well, you're always going to get choices, and you don't have to do everything. You know, there was the opportunity to do this hike to the top of, I think this was in Paradise Bay as well. Look, it was challenging-ish. It wasn't. I mean, I managed to do it, and I'm not super fit. If you don't want to do that, park yourself down on the beach and just wait and see what happens. And it turns into Penguin Highway. So there's always an option for you, no matter how fit or energetic you're feeling. So the big question is what's better? You know, I actually always say, well, do you prefer penguins or do you prefer polar bears? We actually had one of our expedition leader, Flo, who was up in the Arctic. She summed it up perfectly for me. We had breakfast with her on that last morning, and she's been to both polar regions a lot. And I said, so how do you answer that question? And she said, Sarah, when people ask me which polar region's better, I simply say, it's just like red wine or white wine. Whatever preference you have, you just want more of it. So I certainly fell in love with both polar regions. I can see the attraction to go to both. I want more of both. Just remember, we are your polar experts. Aaron Russ, who owns Wild Earth Travel, he's certainly been to both the polar regions, dare I say, probably into the hundreds of times, and led voyages up there. As well as the rest of our team. We're fortunate to live what we breathe and what we sell, and you get that first-hand experience with us, with our team. You know, whether you want to ring us, whether you want to catch up in person, whether you want to do something with your clients, you know, a lot of the time it's their only time they're going to go to these regions, and you've really got to get it right. So we're here to help you. We are your polar experts. With that first-hand experience in both regions. Just remember, the first question you ask your clients is why. Why do you want to go there? And then we help match make the right polar region, the right part of the region, the when, the how, the who, and the what, to help your clients make sure their voyage is one in a million.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that insight, Sarah. I think I might have reframed it as well. Not necessarily which pole, but which one first, because I think they look both amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of our operators do have fantastic solo offerings. Again, when I do client events, the first thing solo travelers, they feel a bit miffed when they have to pay twice as much to go to these places.
Yeah.
It's like an aeroplane. A lot of it's done with yield management. So the earlier they book, the better chance they are of getting, whether it's a no solo supplement, whether it's a small solo supplement, you know, the price adjusts according to when it's booked. We also, with some of our operators, do sharing as well. So if you're open to that, then that's also, and you make amazing friends. I shared a cabin with Marge when I went down to the sub-Antarctic islands, and she's just, it was meant to be, lifelong friend now.
Groups and families, they kind of like want to do the experience together. What kind of options do they have?
Oh, incredible. And I think things are changing. It's not just where you're traveling, but it's how you're how you're traveling. And I think with families and groups, you know, it's about making memories together, making memories as a family, but not having the burden of someone having to do the driving or book the batch or cook the dinners or what have you. So intergenerational travel is really, really popular. And you know, I would rather leave not that I have grandchildren, but one day I will. I'd rather leave them memories and you know, a full heart. So and be able to do these things with them. So intergenerational travel is certainly popular, and groups as well. You know, if you're an agent or a client looking to take a group away, you're not talking dozens and dozens of people. Just get a few like-minded people together. We can help you again find the right voyage with the right operator, with all those right conditions and things. And we're there to help you sell it and fill it as well.
Yeah.
And hey, it's worth a punt. You know, if you don't sell your group, we can always look at FIT. So
Mm.
absolutely, if you think you've got like-minded people, and people attract people too. So my biggest advice is do it further out. Start promoting it. Get those expressions of interest. I'll come along and do an event or what have you. Um,
Yep.
and when you get that interest level, then you can actually
Mm.
secure a group knowing you've got those numbers.
We are talking about bucket list kind of travel. What would you recommend booking in advance? How long should like we look at?
We can actually look, a lot of our operators repeat the itineraries year on year, and we're so familiar with them, you can kind of see who's going to be doing what when. So, you know, the big thing is decide which voyage, which of those four main itineraries that you want to do, what time of the season you want to go, and then we can start looking at things. I would say you've got to be at least 2 years out, get an expression of
Yeah.
interest out. We can hold
Mm.
some cabins for you, and then you're actually knowing you're going to get. There's nothing worse than going, oh gosh, I've now got X amount of people, but I didn't hold enough cabins. So
Yeah.
there's no
Yep.
such thing as looking at things too far out. We're looking at
Mm.
groups, you know, at least a couple of years out to know that we've got that foresight, and we can go, right, we're
Yeah.
going to grab those cabins as soon as they're
Mm.
released. And they might have a mix of twin share, double, and single. So again, it's getting that
Yeah.
mix right.
Yeah. And I know for a lot of the operators, their best sale is actually at the start, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Just think small ships, you know, we don't have a huge amount of inventory. We don't have a lot of cabins. And the worst thing you can do is leave it, because you're going to miss out. You're going to miss out on a cabin altogether, or you might not just get that cabin configuration, or the
Yeah.
deck that you want to be on. So there's no such thing as booking too early when it comes to small ships.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Any parting words of wisdom or
Just
advice?
get there. You know, you only live
Yeah.
once. Coming from the
Yeah.
girl who's allergic to snow, I think I was definitely the litmus test. I think when
Mhm.
Aaron told me at first I was going to Antarctica, I was like, crikey, if I can fall in love with Antarctica, then,
Mm.
you know, anyone can. It's just the most, it reminds me of Africa in a crazy
Mhm.
way. So, you know, if your clients have done a safari and they're looking for the next safari jeep, put them
Yep.
on an expedition, and it's not cold. The wildlife's incredible, and it's just it's gonna fill your soul.